Imagine a world of Warcraft. Not like the one we have today, but a different reality filled with slapstick humor, juvenile jokes, and spotty Saturday morning cartoon animation.
Well, we don't have to imagine it, because this actually happened. Back in their younger, more carefree, less microtransaction-filled days, Blizzard Entertainment had the notion to fund and co-develop a point-and-click adventure set within the deep lore of Warcraft.
This game would have players follow a mighty orc chieftain and chronicle his rise from humble servitude to absolute power. It would include high-quality hand-drawn animation, exquisitely painted backgrounds, and top-tier voice acting talent. It was meant to be a cinematic tour de force filled with adventure, intrigue, and brain-bending puzzles that could stand alongside adventure game giants like Monkey Island, King's Quest, and other notable hits from LucasArts and Sierra.
The results? Well, due to quality concerns, Blizzard basically tossed the game as far as they could into Ragefire Chasm. For years, this forgotten oddity languished beneath mountains of the deepest black rock. However, nothing on the internet stays buried forever. Thanks to fan leaks, a rudimentary build of the incomplete game resurfaced in 2016 and was fixed up to a fully completable condition by one incredible mad lad, Silver83.
While you might expect this video to be a half-hour plus dunk session on an unfinished game that's 2 decades old, there's actually some redeeming qualities here. A satisfying story payoff can be found within these forgotten bits and bytes, and it's definitely a game that leaves behind an interesting legacy.
So let's crack open a gnomish black ale and dive deep through the dark portal to see what awaits within Warcraft Adventures, Lord of the Clans.
My name is Boss Sauce.
And I'm Rollin' Coons. And together,
we are the two-headed hero. Warcraft Adventures Lord of the Clans is a traditional 2D point-and-click adventure. While technically cancelled in 1998, the game is now fully playable, and the plot even makes a modicum of sense due to the patch.
Players take control of Thrall, an enslaved orc warrior that lives a humiliating life of service under the iron fist of the twisted and cruel Lord Blackmoor. After 22 years of imprisonment, Blackmoor tests Thrall's loyalty by ordering him to kill a fellow slave. Having never seen another of his own kind, Thrall refuses the order and is tossed into the dungeons to await his own execution.
Our grumpy green hero hilariously escapes imprisonment with the help of a clever disguise and an impromptu catapult ride. He spies a wanted poster depicting an orcish outlaw which points him towards Grom Hellscream's band of orcish rebels. Following the trail, our warrior finds the formerly proud members of the Horde, broken, disheartened, and addicted to the gnome's black ale. Thrall is enraged at the plight of his people and gets swept up in an epic quest in order to reunite the clans, restore the Horde to its former glory, and exact his revenge upon the Alliance.
It almost hurts me to go through this whole overview, because like every sentence there, I have something to say about what happened, about the choices made, you know what I mean?
I get it. There's gonna be some stuff. We're just gonna put a big old post-it note right here that says, there's gonna be some stuff. Big asterisk.
There's so much. Lord of the Clans is a strange historical footnote that swings wildly in both quality and tone. The game confronts players with heavy themes like addiction and slavery, and then turns right around to make masturbation jokes or sprinkle in some slapstick humor.
It's not too big of a stretch to consider Lord of the Clans to be the retconned Warcraft equivalent of another forgotten entry from a different beloved franchise, the Star Wars Christmas Special. Both are filled with a painful lack of consistency and direction, while also still containing some redeemable moments of quality production value. So how did Blizzard even decide to take on the titanic task of a point-and-click production in the first place? Well, let's get into the history lesson.
Back in the mid and late 90s, Blizzard Entertainment was synonymous with video game rock stardom. Amongst their busy schedule of publishing console bangers like Rock and Roll Racing and Lost Vikings, and the ever underrated Blackthorn, Blizzard found the time to go head-to-head against Westwood Studios in the emerging real-time strategy arena by dropping a double dose of bangers: Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, and its follow-up, Warcraft 2, Tides of Darkness.
By late 1996, the popularity of Warcraft 2 had exploded. Noting the Warcraft universe's rich setting and deep lore, sister company Capital Media reportedly floated the idea of a classic point-and-click adventure set in Azeroth. At the time, it made sense. Blizzard had already proven themselves with puzzle platformers, mastered the realm of real-time strategy, and were on the verge of redefining the RPG with Diablo, turning it into a crazy, mouse-breaking clickfest. But why not go for the old goblin hat trick and take aim at the tried and true adventure genre?
That's right, if I can produce one genre.
Yeah, that was the logic. If I can make one kind of video game, I can do any video game. And Blizzard was about to find out that it was a lesson to learn.
Capital Multimedia had at least some experience developing point-and clickers, although admittedly for a younger crowd, and they had major holdings in an animation studio. It seemed like a perfect match. At a time when Warcraft seemed to be on every home PC, it made sense to capitalize on this and cement the lore of Azeroth and Draenor in the minds of gamers young and old. Blizzard would provide the story structure and designs, while Capital and their buddies would devise the gameplay, sound, and art. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, to start, the animation studio with the strong relationship to Capital Multi was none other than Animation Magic, the same Russian studio responsible for the incredibly cursed, yet undeniably meme-worthy Zelda titles for the now defunct Phillips CDI console.
You've killed me!
Good.
Oh, did the CDI not make it?
The CDI didn't make it, guys.
Rip, guys. Breaking news. To make matters worse, the physical distance between teams, language barrier issues, and Blizzard's own inexperience with developing adventure games dragged out the development process significantly. Similarly to a film or a video essay, scripting, storyboarding, and voiceover is normally done near the beginning of an adventure title's production rather than the end. This process was completely backwards compared to how Blizzard was accustomed to working. And by their own admission, the game felt comparatively simplistic, subpar, and conservative when placed against their other offerings.
Even after bringing veteran adventure game designer Steve Moratsky into the fold to punch up the game's puzzles, Lord of the Clans was looking dated compared to the vibrant offerings from LucasArts, who had recently dropped the phenomenal Curse of Monkey Island into the market. Warcraft Adventures was abandoned after 18 long months of rocky development and numerous delays. Keep in mind, games were less complex and team sizes along with their accompanying budgets were much smaller back in those days. This might seem like a short flip of the calendar nowadays compared to the likes of Blizzard's own Diablo 3 or Duke Nukem Forever, but 18 months was considered to be at least the outer circles of development hell in the 90s.
After measuring the enormous piles of cash from the astounding success of their fantastic mouse-ruining Skinnerbox Diablo and their pioneering online service Battle.net, Blizzard decided to quietly entomb Lord of the Clans deep within its mausoleum of discarded dreams and announced the game's cancellation in May 1998. I'm guessing that Disney has a similar thing.
Yeah, they have like a cryo chamber where Walt Disney's actually frozen.
Yeah, nestled up to all the things that are currently not streaming. The entombment move was met with a surprising amount of fan backlash, and an online petition to reinstate the game's development gathered over 1,700 signatures, which was a real feat considering the creaky modem speeds of the 1900s.
The 1900s? Yeah, hold on, I gotta hook up the horse and buggy to the internet here.
The 1990s were in the 1900s.
I guess that's true, but it just sounds really funny to say it that way.
You cannot deny that the 1990s were in the 1900s.
I cannot. That is a fact. A factual thing.
And in the 1900s, we had slower modems.
Just like the Wrath of the Lich King, nothing dead in the digital domain ever truly dies. Which brings us to 2016, when the partially finished Warcraft Adventure was leaked onto the internet by enthusiastic fans. Work didn't stop there, however. August of 2022 saw the release of the Warcraft Cutscene Restoration Project. This was mostly the work of one very ambitious German fan, DerSilver83, who repainted individual frames, fixed continuity errors, and even replaced missing sound effects and voice lines.
I've got your camouflage lights here. Sorry.
Oh no! Man, you got replaced by a robot while you were on the world map.
I think I'll just sit here and look stupid.
Well, at least this meant the game was fully playable, although not perfect. As evidenced by the somewhat jarring yet hilarious text-to-speech in a few sections, not everything could be replaced. Still, while the quality of some of the speech and animation leaves a bit to be desired, the overall result is a vast improvement over the 2016 version. This is the version we'll be reviewing today, so I think now's as good a time as any to talk about the rest of the game's presentation.
We call ourselves
The Warsong clan.
Warsong? Why?
Now it's clear that a ton of time, effort, and expense was put into the sights and sounds of Azeroth here. Early interviews and promo materials bragged about 40,000 individual animation frames, 20 minutes of cutscenes, 70 characters, and 60 locations. And honestly, this game looks pretty good in screenshots. Gorgeous hand-painted backgrounds bring a 90s Saturday morning cartoon vibe to the locations, and crisp, expressive characters take center stage.
Thrall himself looks pretty great over the entire course of the game, enjoying crisp line work and a vast variety of different animations and expressions. Many of the other main characters enjoy a similar amount of attention. There's some truly cool looking moments mixed in, like a duel between a Frost Wolf clan warrior and a giant yeti, or this super silly hookah puffing version of Deathwing, or a few clever moments involving these handsome devils.
Look at these two burly dudes. It's kind of like looking in a mirror, huh? But why is the one on the right so angry?
Probably because he knows the left guy hasn't subscribed to the channel. There are two ogres within you. One of them has subscribed to the Two-Headed Hero channel, and the other one is the other one.
Hey, don't be left out like the left guy. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and let us know which of these boys is more handsome by leaving a comment.
Unfortunately, the same level of care doesn't apply to most of the minor characters. Even taking into account the game's unfinished state, a lot of the visuals feel particularly uneven. This dwarf guard in the very first area staggers across the room while his proportions shift and swell like an angry balloon animal. Gazlo the goblin engineer has arms that can't quite seem to settle on a singular length, and is this really the best they could do for Alexstrasza, the Lifebinder, leader of the Red Dragonflight and Queen of the Dragons?
Cutscenes in particular run at a nice choppy 12 frames per second, while the game's animation runs around 30. If you have a keen eye, you might notice some occasional screen tearing in the captured footage due to this frame discrepancy. Through our entire playthrough of the game, this was unnoticeable, so I believe this is attributed to my capture software rather than the settings used to render the game in Windows.
While Animation Magic nearly doubled their staff in order to work their trademark magic on many of the other cutscenes, South Korean animation studio Tune Us In was brought in for several key sequences. Let's just say the difference in quality shows. This is probably most obvious when you compare the restored Animation Magic intro from the content patch against the one redone by Tune Us In.
Moving on to audio, it's obvious that much of the sound effects are placeholder. What was that?
Problem.
There are also some bugs and issues with the mix. Certain effects or ambient tracks were ear-bleedingly loud throughout entire scenes, and the audio levels never seemed to stay the same when traveling between scenes, no matter how often I adjusted them. See you later, guys. Sorry I caused so much damage. But that probably is also attributed to the game's unfinished state. The soundtrack is full of appropriately tribal-flavored drum ambience, mixed in with some orchestral horns. It's low-key and moody, and while none of it stands out as future playlist material, some of it was quite good, and we found it to be perfectly tuned to the game's adventure cartoon vibes without being bombastic or intrusive.
Voice performances are equally inconsistent, and the game's unfinished corners sometimes poke through. On the upside, lead roles are filled by quality talent. Thrall is voiced by the unmistakable Clancy Brown of Highlander fame.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.
Ogre Doomhammer was voiced by Peter Cullen, better known as freaking Optimus Prime.
I am Optimus Prime, and this message is to my creators. Leave planet Earth alone.
And Tony J, who's been in pretty much every 90s cartoon ever, voices the shaman Drekthar.
This is wrong. This is all wrong.
According to a few sources, several Warcraft 2 voice actors were considered and unfortunately excluded due to union complications, but several voice lines from the seminal RTS game were reused here to good effect. Most of the minor voiced roles range from comical yet passable to scenery-chewing cringe, but overall the production level is pretty high.
Just relax. Before the hour's up, you'll have a great weight off your shoulders. Your head!
Considering the production value alone, Warcraft Adventures might have held its own against its adventure game rivals if it had come out a few years before its intended release window. But when compared to finely polished contemporaries like King's Quest VIII and Curse of Monkey Island, and with the specter of the LucasArts masterpiece Grim Fandango just around the corner, Lord of the Clans would have looked and felt positively dated in comparison. The game's design feels fairly safe, sticking with a standard point-and-click interface and a few simplified commands that can be accessed with a cursor hold. It immediately brings to mind the Look, Talk, Touch cursor from 1995's LucasArts biker adventure Full Throttle. Azeroth has a fairly high number of diverse locations, all arranged into 8 hub regions on this handy map. There are no death sequences and no game overs, and the majority of the puzzle designs seem sensible enough, despite some simplicity and silliness.
An early game sequence has Thrall stealing a disguise to sneak past some crossbowmen. You can sneak a robe from the closet of this sleepy monk to fool them, but if you forget to put on gloves, a friendly wave with his meaty green dick slappers will give him away to the guards. In case there was any question about the game's wild tonal shifts, Thrall's next move is to make his daring escape by flinging himself from a catapult.
And he just smashes into the side of the wall if you don't make a hole in the wall first. It goes straight from slavery and genocide to
fucking Looney Tunes, man.
Later challenges prove much more interesting, such as bartering back and forth with Zul'jin at his pawn shop in order to get on the good side of a group of Horde rebels, or deciphering spell scrolls to determine their ritual components. Overall, puzzle difficulty leans towards the mild side. There may be a few head scratchers here and there over the game's 4 or 5 hour length, but most of the challenge comes from some design decisions that really zog my tog, if you know what I mean.
Ooh, excuse me. There's a lot of backtracking. You're gonna have to make some mental notes of every nook and cranny that could come in handy as the mighty Thrall finds himself zeppelining around Azeroth to pick up seemingly inconsequential pieces of cloth or mop up the odd forgettable patch of oil in order to solve some of the more obscure puzzles several hours later. This backtracking can feel like an exercise in repetition, but on the bright side, all the transition animations are skippable with the tap of the escape key. However, why would you ever want to skip these ladder animations? Look at the level of detail they put into him climbing up a ladder and failing.
My headcanon is that there was one guy that was just put on ladder animations and he was like, okay, here I am at work 40 hours a week. I'm gonna make so many ladder animations. There's also a bit of a visual disconnect between most of the interactables and the backgrounds. Generally, stuff you can use stands out from the background with an obvious change in art style, like this here stone gargoyle perched on the castle wall. However, the game doesn't always follow its own rules regarding this, especially later on, as more and more background objects prove themselves to be important puzzle pieces. As a result, many of the locations are reduced to pixel hunts as you scan the screen looking for that one chunk of interactable background that'll allow you to progress.
Now that you know what you're in for with the wild World of Warcraft Adventures, it's time to talk about the great purple Elec in the room. Before we get into story spoiler territory, we need to make it clear that there's still no way of finding a legit retail copy of this game. We don't want Blizzard getting all litigious on us, so unfortunately we can't source the game image for you. That means if you want to play the game yourself, the only available avenue is to join up with the Bloodsail Buccaneers and sail the high seas.
I don't know what you're referring to. If you do happen to stumble upon the game files during your swashbuckling journey, you'll likely notice that it won't run properly on modern operating systems, but never fear. Through some hacky maneuvers involving gnomish technology, goblin engineering, and just a little bit of magic, we were able to get this game functioning perfectly in widescreen as well as restore and improve the cutscenes, thanks to the help and resources provided by the Warcraft Adventures Cutscenes Remaster project. So if you're looking for a crash course in getting the experience up and running for yourself, please check out the tutorial video here.
Lord of the Clans weaves an entertaining tale of betrayal, enslavement, and triumph over adversity. The subject matter is riddled with more darkness than the Dark Portal itself, and yet the writers make a lot of interesting choices to include a ton of goofy comedic elements in the moment-to-moment gameplay that directly clashes with the macabre story presented in the game's cutscenes. For every dead serious and dire revelation about Thrall's destiny, there's a cheap masturbation joke or a dragon butthole reference tossed out like it's open mic night at the comedy club. Even though the game sometimes stumbles along the way, the endgame sequence and the story payoff is incredibly satisfying.
Well, incredibly?
I thought so. Dude, I went back and rewatched the whole footage, and if you would have just watched the cutscene sequences and stuff, like the major story beats, it is actually a pretty cool story. It's just the little moment-to-moment, like, slapstick stuff that just feels bad and sticks out. I don't know.
Yeah, and that moment-to-moment slapstick stuff is the game part of the game. A lot of the cartoony logic is sort of what the audience is coming there for. Like, yes, I will combine these things because in sort of a Rube Goldbergian way, that makes sense to me that I could get through this odd problem that way.
Here's my theory about this. So if you look at Blizzard's catalog from around this time, they are pretty infamous for copying other games' homework and trying to make it better and put their own spin on it. You look at Dune 2, they came out with Warcraft. You look at Blackthorn, Flashback came out right before that. You know, like, so it's nothing new. So I think what they were doing was they were trying to take the games from like 1995. There's definitely influences from like The Dig and, you know, Full Throttle and stuff in here. Full Throttle, like the interface is completely ripped off of Full Throttle.
Yeah, I mean, The Dig is a good example of a adventure game that actually nails a serious tone.
Yeah, and there's tons of examples. Serious adventure games have been around since adventure games have been around. But more popular and accessible ones for this time period happen to be more comedic and family-friendly, and I think Blizzard was looking to cash in on expanding the Warcraft franchise into different forms of media at this point. One final word of caution before we move into spoiler territory: the restored AMI introduction from the cutscene restoration patch kinda ruins some of the major plot beats. Yes, we know this cutscene is an irresistible deep well of meme-worthy humor, but it's also a heavy-handed exposition dump that takes away a lot of the impact from some of the key revelations. And if you plan on playing through Lord of the Clans yourself, we'd highly recommend skipping it until you complete the game. Spoiler skeletons ahead! And if you want to avoid him, skip to here.
At the end of Warcraft 2, the Dark Portal was destroyed, leaving a large group of Orcish forces stranded in the land of Azeroth and unable to return to their home dimension of Draenor. With their forces in disarray, the Orcish clans left behind found themselves in a series of brutal power struggles.
Warcraft Adventures Lord of the Clans opens with the clashing of blades. A fierce orc warrior takes his last stand in a vain attempt to shield his family from a pair of barbaric rivals. The proud warrior and his wife are killed during the bloody struggle, leaving only a screaming burrito behind.
As rain begins to fall, Lord Blackmore stumbles upon the scene of the battle, taking the burrito into his care and returning to Durnhold Keep. Blackmore raises this entree from infancy with the ideals and education of a human, and his intention is to use him as a weapon to control the remnants of the clans. 22 years pass, and we see the baby has grown into a strong young orc, naming him Thrall. But when Blackmore puts Thrall to the ultimate test of loyalty by ordering him to kill one of his own kind, Thrall refuses and is tossed into a dungeon to await his execution. So Blackmore had 22 years to, like, Stockholm Syndrome this baby orc, and just, like, instead was a cartoon villain. He just had 20 years, a little bit too busy of cartoon villain stuff. Adopting a baby has a pretty low return on investment ratio as far as evil plans go.
Yeah.
So we've learned that. Thank you.
So he teaches Thrall to, like, read and write and fight gladiatorial combat style. Damn, dude, like, this was his plan. Like, Blackmore's plan is dumb. To begin with.
It will only take 22 years to maybe come to fruition.
Yeah. Thrall easily breaks free from his crumbling cell in the dungeons of Durnhold, setting up a Home Alone style trap to get rid of the obnoxious dwarven guard.
Can you give him mouth to mouth?
Oh, God. After disguising himself as a priest and sneaking past the crossbowmen stationed on the wall, Thrall escapes the keep by catapulting himself into the nearby forest. And this is the third time we're showing that catapult scene, because it's really fucking silly.
It's very funny. So, let's show it one more time in case we don't get to it later.
One more time in super slow-mo. This escape sequence is the first of many cartoonishly silly tone changes found throughout the rest of the game. A wanted poster nailed to a nearby tree points to the direction of Grom Hellscream, leader of the Orcish rebels, and Thrall makes it his mission to meet this brave warrior.
Within the forest, Thrall meets Gazlo the Goblin Engineer, who appears to have been involved in an unfortunate Zeppelin landing. Gazlo agrees to transport Thrall to the Badlands in exchange for sabotaging plans to the gnomish inventor's new covert communication device. This device turns out to be a chicken-mounted messaging system and provides the opportunity for this extremely tasteful joke.
It poked me in the eye!
It's taking all my willpower not to choke the chicken.
Do you get it?
After completing his spy mission, Gazlo makes good on his promise and takes Thrall to the Orc Reservation in the Badlands. Here we witness one of those cool ladder animations, and also the fate of the once proud Horde remnants, decades after the closure of the Dark Portal. The Orcs here are all hopeless, depressed, and addicted to drinking black ale. This sounds like a harmless enough beverage, but is actually a carefully tailored narcotic designed by the gnomes to keep orcs docile under the Alliance regime.
That's really fucking dark, actually. It's incredibly dark.
Yeah, so we went from catapult escape to keeping a bunch of refugees addicted to a chemical to keep them docile.
On the outskirts of the village, the last remaining members of the Shattered Hand clan are equally reduced to shadows of their former glory, singing drinking songs and reminiscing about the glory days. Their leader Clawhand, a Larry David-sounding washed-up warrior, explains that the Shattered Hand orcs have even pawned their precious prosthetics off in their desperation for more black ale.
Oh, okay. The Shattered Hand has an ancient tradition. When a young warrior comes of age, he cripples his own left hand with the hammer of the chieftain. The hand is then replaced with a weapon suited to that warrior's character.
Sweet.
In time, the weapon becomes an integral part of each clansman. And would any of you like to tell this orc what you did with your weapons? I didn't think so.
Residing in this desolate village, we also find the formerly fierce troll warlord Zul'jin, who has now been reduced to little more than a scummy pawnbroker that trades relics and weapons for extra black ale rations.
Thrall learns from one of the grumpy drunks that a nearby band of sober orcish remnants are attempting to rally the Horde and fulfill their destiny. High up in the hills, an ogre mage guards the entrance to Grom Hellscream's rebel hideout. After a few clever trades and setting up a diversion for the ogre mage's two heads, Thrall finds himself face to face with Grom Hellscream. And Grom is enraged with Thrall's tale of servitude under the humans and shares his goals of restoring the former glory of the Horde by uniting the remnants of the Frostwolf clan with his new clan, the Warsong clan.
What's their couple name? Is it Frostsong or Warwolf?
Warwolf sounds like a 80s hair metal band, so I'm partial to that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. This is where Thrall learns of Rend and Maim, two traitorous orc warriors that work with the Alliance to track down and enslave their former brothers-in-arms. Could these two be the ones that killed his parents in the intro sequence? That would be very convenient narratively. Thrall also notes that the standard of the Frostwolf war banner bears a striking resemblance to the tattered burrito wrapper that he was found in as a babe. In another robot-voiced, unfinished sequence, Grom encourages Thrall to travel to Cosmodon and seek out more clues to his past.
Go then, brother, and learn what you can of your past.
In the frozen land of Cosmodon, Thrall descends to the ruins by ripping a gnarly shred, bruh.
Whoa, I can see my house!
What? That was like a different voice. While exploring deep in the snowy woods, he encounters the Frostwolf warrior Nazgrel, battling a vicious Wendigo. Thrall saves Nazgrel by brandishing a torch, but Nazgrel meets this with anger rather than thanks due to the fact that Thrall apparently interrupted a sacred hunt.
How dare you interfere with a sacred hunt?
You looked like you needed help.
I needed nothing from you.
Nazgrel retreats to the mountain in frustration, but the prophet Drekthar catches wind of their argument and invites Thrall into the sanctum.
Drekthar reveals that the Frostwolf clan has been directionless, drifting without leadership since the death of their last chieftain, Duratan. He believes Thrall to be a warrior of prophecy who has broken out of bondage in a distant land in order to lead the Frostwolf clan to glory once more. The vision reveals that not only would the chieftain of prophecy have to be a strong fighter and a brave leader, but a master of magic as well.
In my vision, the warlord was not only a great fighter and strong leader, but a master of magic as well.
The most important detail, however, is that the chieftain would need to wield the fabled axe of Duratan to prove his claim. So Thrall, being the proud warrior of prophecy, is tasked with retrieving it.
Thrall journeys to a mysterious chamber and finds the axe of Durotan frozen in the ice. Stranger still, markings in the axe's resting place resemble Thrall's hands and face. After melting the ice in a hot spring and taking on a fierce yeti in what was probably supposed to be a cutscene but instead is a cut to black, Thrall returns and is heralded as a true warrior of prophecy, cementing his legacy as the son of Durotan and the chieftain of the Frostwolf clan.
Drexar and the boys reward Thrall with some shiny magic scrolls to begin his shaman training, but Nazgrel the Wolf Rider proves to be a hard guy to win over. He challenges Thrall to steal a griffin egg from the dwarves. The Enclave also suggests that Thrall seek out the whereabouts of Ogrim Doomhammer, who may have known more about the circumstances of his father and mother's death.
Doomhammer lives a life of solitude high upon the mountains of Durnhold, and after a short meet and greet with his friendly puppies, he spills a big pile of exposition all over the room. As it turns out, Doomhammer, Durotan, and Blackhand were once blood brothers that vowed to dedicate their lives to advancing the goals of the Horde. You know, as tight bros do. A warlock named Gul'dan and his covenant of magical buddies corrupted Blackhand, seeking to take control of the Horde for their own ends. Gul'dan sends the Frostwolf clan far into the mountains of Khazmadan, effectively exiling them as Blackhand seizes the moment to install himself as war chief of the Horde. Durotan catches on to this, and during his journey to warn the Frostwolf of this betrayal, he is slain by a pair of assassins. These killers turn out to be Blackrock clan assassins led by none other than the twin sons of Blackhand. That's right, Rend and Maim. Fueled by rage after this discovery, Thrall vows to end Rend and Maim on top of all the other revenge he was already planning to do.
After all this talk of treachery, bloodshed, exile, and assassination, the game takes another tonal shift into absurd silliness. First, Thrall goes undercover in the Dwarven Aviary with the help of one of his fancy magic scrolls.
He kinda does a Sailor Moon.
He does. In this dwarvish disguise, he crafts a warhammer of dubious and indeterminate quality to distract the captain.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely how you do it.
Yeah, he's an orc, he's not a hammer maker.
Outstanding. I'd be proud to wield this in battle myself.
Apparently he's not a great judge of hammer quality either.
Only a fool would use this in battle.
You just said you're proud of it.
I don't think that's how you make hammer. You probably don't make hammer that way.
Now that's one huge gargantuan hammer! I believe it's the finest weapon ever to be carried into battle! You've done an amazing job, lad!
This clears the way for Thrall to head up to the griffin nests, where an illusion spell keeps the beasts busy. Snatching that egg is enough of a feat of bravery to make Nazgrel finally bend the knee, but just as this happens, a dead courier carrying a message from Grom Hellscream falls at their front door.
Hellscream's messenger carries a note with plans to amass forces at Grim Batol. Thrall makes preparations to leave at first light, but Hellscream is captured en route to the meeting by the traitorous Blackrock clan and their human allies. The massing horde swears to free Hellscream from their clutches by staging an assault on the place where our adventure began. Durnhold Keep. Another convenient narrative move.
In order to pull off an assault of this scale, the newly formed horde is going to need some help. Some dragon-shaped help. So Thrall is sent off once again to curry favor from the Queen of Dragons, Alexstrasza. This might prove difficult since the Dragonmaw clan used dragon hatchlings as war machines in the prior war against the humans.
So Thrall approaches Alexstrasza's lair, but she's not into having company. To get close, Thrall has to go back undercover as a dwarf yet again. After seducing this lady dwarf in one of the most cringe-worthy sequences in the game.
Oh, it's beautiful! It looks like I picked the right day to brave my armpits.
Thrall obtains a flame-proof shield that can deflect dragon breath, opening a dialogue with the Queen of Dragons.
Woo! All right, sweet biscuits, come and get it!
How did you know that's my middle name? Thrall Sweet Biscuits McOrc.
Surprised, honey?
It's more like shocked.
Whoa. We got some dwarf nibnobs. To the surprise of no one, Alexstrasza has her own demand before she'll offer help. The destruction of her most hated enemy, Deathwing.
I'll vanquish your most hated enemy.
One pathetic Orgling would accomplish little against any of my enemies.
After a couple pointless yet comical sequences involving a bumbling Death Knight,
Summoning a Death Knight will be your doom. What did you hope to accomplish? Quickly, give me my scepter. I'll grant you eternal life. I'll give you anything. Just give it to me. Give it.
After that, Thrall slips through the gates of Blackrock Spire. Here we see our first glance of Deathwing, a majestic hookah-puffing black dragon that gorges himself on cattle by the cartful. Thrall slips inside one of the cows lined up for consumption, ending up inside Deathwing's belly and leading to another of the game's more juvenile moments.
Back door, huh? Not a good idea.
After giving Deathwing a case of acute indigestion, the dragon explodes, and the next thing we see is Thrall standing triumphantly in front of Alexstrasza's cave with a brand new Deathwing trophy.
Thrall returns to Grim Batol on the back of Alexstrasza, flanked by a flight of red dragons. The Horde has readied themselves for the oncoming battle in his absence, and a determined Orgrim Doomhammer places the mantle of leadership upon Thrall, naming the young brave War Chief of the Horde. Scouts have discovered that Blackmoor is hosting Rend and Maim at Durnhold Keep, and with all of the Horde's enemies gathered in one place, there was no better time to strike.
Nazgrel is promoted to general and charged with spearheading the aerial assault. Thrall volunteers to infiltrate the castle and disable the gates due to his familiarity with its defenses. And before leaving on this dangerous mission, Drekthar grants one final gift, a spell that can banish its target to eternal damnation. It seems like something that could come in handy real soon. The final assault begins, and with it we're treated to a player-driven power trip similar to the end sequence of The Secret of Monkey Island. Thrall jetpacks over the walls of Durnhold Keep, improvising a rocket-propelled grenade and blowing open the front gate in a glorious explosion.
The Horde moves in for the assault, Nazgul leading the charge as Alexstrasza's dragonflight swoops in from above and mysteriously changes colors in midair. During the commotion, Thrall sneaks into the war room and witnesses a blood covenant being sealed between Blackmoor and the twins Rend and Maim. The twins agree to provide Blackmoor with slaves in exchange for a large sack of gold, and we see that Grom Hellscream has been purposely addicted to the black ale during his imprisonment.
More drink. More. Any more questions?
Somehow, Thrall has a revelation and recognizes Rend and Maim from way back when he was still a baby and could not form memories. He interrupts the Covenant with a burn-in ring of fire, but Blackmoor slips away. In another dark, whiplash tonal shift, Thrall uses the banishment spell to painfully damn the twins to the deepest bowels of the underworld and turn them into spooky, scary skeletons.
Thrall gives chase through the burning embers and catches Blackmoor on the roof of the keep, dangling him over the edge as the human lord pitifully begs for his life. But Thrall pursues a nobler path, denying Blackmoor a warrior's death. Blackmoor, of course, pulls a hidden boot knife once Thrall's back is turned, but out of nowhere, Grom Hellscream comes to his senses and sends an axe into the traitorous human's back, sending him toppling from the spire. As Blackmoor plummets to certain death, Thrall raises the banner of the Frostwolf clan high above the raging battle, claiming Durnhold for the Horde. Now, I found this ending sequence to be a really satisfying, over-the-top fun ride. You get to take Thrall on a power trip full of fun, easy puzzles. There's plenty of comparatively gorgeous cutscenes and quality voice acting, and the bad guys get friggin' murked in a righteous payoff. Sure, there's a little plot messiness here, like Thrall suddenly being able to remember his infancy, but damn, overall this was a fun little retcon journey through a what-if scenario in the lands of Azeroth.
Yeah, the ending sequence is weird. To me, it felt like it was very rushed. You know, like they're trying to make this thing feel satisfying, but whereas you'll have to go on these bizarre like backtracking journeys to do the simplest little like favors in order to move along the plot before, for the ending you're kind of like stuck in a single like escape room puzzle a few times in a row, and you're trying to figure out which things to click on.
Use crossbow twice.
The narrative payoff for defeating Thrall's worst enemies at the end, first of all, it almost happens as soon as it is set up, the revelation happens and then he damns them to hell. Like, in the same scene, right?
Well, no, that's not true, because Orgrim Doomhammer reveals that Rendon Mayhem killed his family way back, like halfway through the game.
Yeah, I know, but the stakes of it, like the emotional stakes of it, are set up in that same scene.
The pacing is weird. Lord of the Clans exists as a failed experiment, a museum piece, a digital curio, a rare swing and a miss in Blizzard's heyday that the company ended up burying in its archives along the likes of StarCraft Ghost. Blizzard was hungry to expand into other types of games and media during this point in their company history, and this effort is a rare example of them stepping too far outside of their comfort zone. Earlier, we compared it to the much maligned and equally retconned Star Wars Christmas special, but this is not entirely accurate.
While the Christmas special is painfully dull to watch and filled with incredibly dull, screeching Wookiee monologues, it still features a talented cast and contains a pretty cool and stylish animated segment featuring young Boba Fett. Young Boba. Lil Boba. But Lucasfilm and Disney pointed their Death Star towards it long ago, ensuring none of this misguided Life Day celebration was counted as canon. This is a huge difference from Warcraft Adventures, which also features a quality voice cast and some genuinely impressive art, at least in some areas, but is still referenced canonically to this day.
I see nothing special.
Yeah, it's just a Samaflange, just an ordinary Samaflange.
Regular, just like you buy at a store. The Lord of the Clans game itself was officially removed from the big old Book of Warcraft lore, but a large chunk of the events described within it were surreptitiously added back to canon over the years. The main plot beats and characters were adapted into one of the first novels based in the Warcraft setting, a 2001 paperback by Christie Golden titled, well, Lord of the Clans. And events, items, and characters from this buried adventure still show up much later in the rest of the Warcraft pantheon.
It's nice to look back and remember a time when Blizzard were at their best as world builders and masters of polish. They've created so many far-reaching franchises that have given gamers genre-defining gameplay and engaging lore as far back as Warcraft and as recently as Overwatch. Well, the first Overwatch, at least. Wait. No, well, yes.
Warcraft would go on to expand into a large line of comics, novels, board games, trading cards, wildly successful spin-off games like Hearthstone, and of course, World of Warcraft, the MMO that launched 1,000 clones. There was even a full-length feature movie, which was considered a box office bomb, but strangely blew up in Chinese theaters.
As for the fate of Lord of the Clans, rumors of a series based on the game's animation were tossed around before finally being abandoned. And in the 90s, this would have been awesome to see alongside the rest of the after-school cartoon lineup. With the game being inconsistent in tone, noticeably dated, and lackluster in several key areas of design, it's plain to see why it was shelved. But all things considered, I feel like history might have judged this game a little bit too harshly.
In fantasy media, it's all too often that orcs and goblins are tossed in as mindless cardboard cutout monsters, existing for the sole purpose of being slaughtered by shiny sword-swinging heroes. It's far more interesting to take what's commonly a base-level RPG monster and explore their cultures, their motivations, and their struggles in a more sympathetic light. We see this otherly perspective only rarely, even today, but it's something I always go out of my way to explore whenever possible when a game offers the opportunity. Lord of the Clans might stumble a bit throughout its 4 to 5 hour runtime, and it's not completely finished, but it delivers an interesting story about a downtrodden outsider and his journey to greatness. My binky!
So anyways, that's it for Lord of the Clans. Let us know if you liked our little journey through this cancelled caper down in the comments, and if there's any more crazy half-finished games out there worth taking a look at, we'd love to hear about them. If you like what we're doing here on Two-Headed Hero, maybe take a second to throw us a couple coins on our brand new Patreon page, or consider becoming a channel member.
And if you want to support us but don't have the dollary dues, please give us a bump on the algorithm by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. And as always, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next Two-Headed Hero.
Damn, I look good.